Hi, my name is Corey Brett. I'm the pastor at St. Peter's United Methodist Church in Wellington, Florida. And today I wanted to talk to you about the subject of grief. Right now we're in the middle of the season where people are buying presents and eating food with lots of people. Maybe they're visiting family or family's coming into town. They're singing songs, and it's the most wonderful time of the year, and watching their favorite Christmas movies. While it can be fantastic for some people, for others they carry this burden of grief. Maybe they've recently lost someone in their family that's died, and maybe they're just suffering because there's sickness and ailments there. Maybe there's somebody who's missing in their life, and they're wondering, how do I navigate this time that is talked about of sharing with family when someone who used to be a significant part of my life is now gone? And so I wanted to talk to you about how does that fit in with this time of Christmas. As many of you know that Emmanuel, a word that we hear often at Christmas, means God come near, that God is near us. And I want to say that is the heart of what this is that we do go through difficult times. We will go through difficult times. Psalm 23 says, even when I go through the valley of the shadow of death, that when God walks me through, it doesn't say if I go through, it says when I go through, that God leads me, and He's leading me to still waters, to green pastures, to bring me to peace and wholeness. That's the story we see in Matthew as Jesus is walking to Jericho, and there's blind Bartimaeus. He's crying out, and people are trying to shush him. And that happens with grief. When we grieve, sometimes people want to shush because we're thinking, if they talk about their grief, it's going to bring me down. Or don't you just want to look on the brighter side of life and cheer up? And it's the same way that people are hushing blind Bartimaeus. But he keeps calling out all the more. And Jesus says, who is this? Bring him here. And someone says, good news, Bartimaeus. He wants to see you. And Jesus sees this man and says, what is it that you want? And he's asking us that same question. What is it that you want? We want to be healed. We want to know that peace that passes understanding. And so how do we get there? How do we walk through grief well? Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you as some things that I've learned by working with hospice and others in grief in my time of studying as a counselor, some things that have picked up along the way. How do we walk through this time? And so grief, as hospice talks about it, is a deep or intense sorrow due to loss. Grief is normal, it's healthy, and necessary. Bereavement means broken, torn apart, needing special care. And so when we're bereaved or we're walking with people who are bereaved, we need to bring that special care, or we need that special care. One of the biggest lies we tell to ourselves is that I just need to buck up. I don't need help. I can do this alone. We need others. Emmanuel, God come near, and God comes near to us through others. So let me walk you through a few things that I have found helpful in my life and that others have found helpful. The first thing I want to talk about in working with grief and walking through grief is to be honest with yourself and others. It's okay when people ask you to not say, I'm fine. As a matter of fact, we're not fine. Fine, I can't remember the movie, I think it was the Italian Job that said fine means freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And that's probably how we really are. But let's be honest about how we really are. 1 hour, someone may ask you, how are you feeling? We may say, I feel good. And 20 minutes later, we might say, meh, I don't know. That's the bizarre thing about grief, the wonderful thing, the frustrating thing. You can feel like you're going crazy when you're grieving because 1 minute you're laughing and the next minute you're crying, and sometimes you're doing both, and you make that delightful snot cry laugh. That's always a joy to experience. Parts of grieving is weird. So be honest with yourself and others. When they ask, let them know. They can deal with your answer, they ask. And if they can't, that is not your responsibility. You're called to be responsible toward others, but not for them. You be responsible for your feelings. They can handle theirs. The other thing is that parts are going to be painful and weird. You're going to be on that emotional roller coaster, as I just mentioned, that up and down. And somebody may ask you, and it's perfectly all right to say, I don't know how I am. Another thing about being honest with yourself is don't make false promises to yourself. Sometimes what we do is we tell ourselves, I'm not going to cry this time. Oh, I'm not going to be emotional this time. Why do we make that promise to ourselves? It's a ridiculous promise. Look, people cry at beer commercials during Super Bowl. If people can cry at beer, it is okay for you to cry about someone you loved who has died. Which brings me to the next point. There are idiots out there. I guess I should say there are people who exhibit the behavior of idiots out there. Some are going to come up to you in a year and say, and think, maybe even say, aren't you over this? You just need to work through it. You just need to power through. You just need to start forcing yourself to feel better, which is just a ridiculous thing. Those people are ridiculous. Resist the urge to punch them in the throat, or poke them in the eye, or jab your thumb up their nose. It's not about getting over. Grieving is not about getting over things. It's about living in the new reality of someone you love not being there. There will always be days that you will miss those you love. My uncle, he died about 20 years ago. There are days that I miss him and I get a little moist in my eye. There are days I think of him and I laugh. Working through grief doesn't mean we won't miss somebody. It means we will not be crushed and can actually smile when we miss them. We might even smile as we cry. And so another thing we can do, after being honest with ourselves, is to talk. Talk. Sometimes the name becomes like Voldemort. He who cannot be named. If we say the name, someone's going to run out of the room. That's perfectly fine as well. But make sure you talk. How we talk matters. Over and over, there's this idea that we need to talk. The worst thing that I see families do is when they cease talking. They're afraid if we talk, we're just going to cry, we're going to get emotional. But the problem is that it just gets you get emotionally constipated, honestly. Talking is just like a wonderful enema. Maybe not the best illustration, but maybe it is. It frees us up to grieve and gets that stuff that can fester inside us out. Talk, say the name, be free to live, be free to share the name and the stories. Love. When you love someone, you want to talk about them. Suddenly the Christmas music is on, the lights are twinkling, every romance movie is snow, love is talked about over and over. No one else is silent about who they love. You don't need to be silent either. Others might feel awkward. That's okay. That's, again, their issue. Say the name. Share the name. Ask your friends to bring up the name. Speak the name. Tell the stories. With your family, maybe it would be a good idea to plan a time each week when your family can share stories together, when you guys could, in a safe place, y'all could share. Or if it's tougher for you and your family to share, this can help give boundaries to how you talk about it or when you talk about it, because you need to know yourself. How are you walking with this? Maybe you need a safer place to experience your emotions. It gives boundaries for those who run out of the room when the name is mentioned. And if you are one who runs out, that's okay. Find a person whom you can trust, though, and talk about it. It's okay to cry. It's okay not to cry. It's okay not to know how to express yourself or to be incoherent when you do. Know your limits. Say yes to some holiday invitations, say no to others, and it's okay to cancel. Let's say you made plans to go out and you're feeling especially emotional that day and you don't really want to see anybody that day. That is okay. Throw the etiquette book out. You don't have to go. The etiquette book is stupid anyway. Grieving is hard and it can be exhausting. So know your limits. Take it easy on yourself. Sometimes what we think is if I just keep busy. Well, you can do that for a little bit. But keeping busy won't really distract you, but it just prolongs the grief. So take time for yourself. That's different than isolation. You can take some time to be by yourself and reflect on all that's happening. But be intentional about it. Give yourself freedom to be by yourself. But again, that's different than isolation and cutting yourself off. The other thing is what's right. Everyone's going to give you advice. If you think when you had a baby, people had advice for you, it's even the same when you have someone you love die. And so take it with a grain of salt. Some people might have good ideas. Some people just may not be thinking at all. Just pay attention to yourself. One size doesn't fit all. What's good for Susie is not the same for Johnny. Plan ahead. What family traditions you want to do. I know that those loved ones who died, they were part of those different traditions. Maybe there's some you want to keep and carry on. Maybe there's some you want to change. What is it you would like to do different this year? It's okay. If there's something you want to do in memory, I've seen some people do some wonderful things. Some traditions they kept, some they changed, but they kept telling the story. The other is, don't shame yourself or lie to yourself. Sometimes we think being happy means I'm forgetting. And so if you start to feel happy, I've seen some people go, I'm not allowed to feel happy. I just lost someone. Those are two different things. They're not connected. You can be happy and not forget someone. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be sad. Working through the grief doesn't mean you're letting go of the person. It means you're letting go of the pain that has controlled you so you can move to where you can really remember the person you love. Discover your center. Oh, well, one more thing I want to say about that. Shame does nothing to bring your loved one back or help you honor your loved one. It only buries the living. And the other thing is you're not alone. It's the human condition. We all grieve. No one makes it through this life unscathed. It is a hard life sometimes. Everyone has experienced grief at some point. So find someone to connect with. You're not alone. You're not alone. Discover your center. What brings you life? What practices help you clear your head and your soul? Inventory your life. Use it for positive. There's no rule that says you have to beat yourself up, but plenty that talk about forgiveness of others, forgiveness of self, of getting help, of new beginnings, of new chances. Remember, Jesus was born in obscurity in a podunk town and in obscurity and brokenness, and life was rough, chaotic. But it's a story all throughout Scripture, this chaos. But God comes in the middle of the chaos to bring order in life. And so my prayer for you this Christmas is that Christ can be born anew in you wherever you are or however you understand Jesus at this point in your life. That he can give birth to peace and life and love as you learn how to grieve in this new season of your life. Peace.